Premier League predictions 25-26. Who I think is going to win the league? Who I think is going to get European football top four? Who's going to get relegated? And everything in between that. So yeah, Premier League starts up this weekend. Want to get my predictions in. Really has the potential to be an all-timer season. I'm really excited for the Premier League football starting up again, and to start making videos a little bit more consistently. This is my first video in about a couple months. Haven't been able to record or make any videos just because I've been busy with a couple of things, been traveling. And yeah, with the start of the season, I'm trying to be a little bit more consistent with the videos because I really enjoy doing this. Just for a disclaimer, I'm going away in a couple of weeks for about a month, just over a month, so there'll probably be a bit of a break before that or during that period of time. But again, as the season starts up, I want to be a little more consistent. And yeah, because I really enjoy making these videos, talking about football, because it's just something that I enjoy doing. And yeah, let's get into the prediction. Alright, got myself a tier list here. Every single team in the Premier League this season, all the way from champions down to relegation. I'm going to work my way up from 20th to first place. Also, just a disclaimer, if the audio sounds like an echo or you can hear like the AC going on in the background, it's hot as hell today. So, sorry about that. But anyways, let me get straight into it. Again, yeah, let's just get into it. So, in at the bottom, so for me, at 20th, I have Burnley, followed by Leeds and Sunderland. I'm going to do all three at the same time. All three promoted teams, I think they're going all straight down. Now, for me, Burnley and Leeds, especially Burnley, for me is still a championship team. I don't think they've done enough in the summer in terms to elevate themselves as a team that can survive in the Premier League. Same thing with Leeds. I think Leeds have a slightly better chance. However, I don't really like their manager, Daniel Farke. I think for me, he's a guy who just, any team he coaches in the Premier League, they just get instantly relegated or he'll just find the sack. I think he'll be one of the first managers to go in the league. Now, Sunderland are a little bit more interesting. As we've seen in previous years, usually the team that comes up through the playoffs is usually the most competitive in the league, and I think that's mostly because these teams are more suited to play a more defensive style, due to the fact that, you know, a team that wins the championship is probably playing a more attacking, more progressive style of play. So translating that into a league where all of a sudden they become an underdog and they have to play a little bit more robust and defensive. A team that finishes, you know, I guess further down the table in the championship probably is more suited to a style of play such as that. So I think with Sunderland we'll see a bit of, they'll adapt better to pretty much how they have to play in the Premier League. Now, I do like their transfer window. However, I do think it's being a bit overblown in terms of how good the players they are bringing in terms of how much they can elevate the squad to stay in the Premier League. As we've seen in the last 2 years, it's been 3 up, 3 down, and it hasn't even been close. These teams are not getting close to 40 points, and usually the gap between 18th and 17th is usually a large points gap. And do I think Sunderland will close the gap with their signings? No. I think now we're starting to see a huge gap between the Premier League and the Championship. And key players they brought, such as Indringa and Diarra, are going to be going away for AFCON for a month. So again, I just don't think Sunderland have enough to get up. I think just the difference between the Premier League teams and the 3 promoted teams is too much. And I think we'll see 3 up, 3 down for the 3rd year in a row. Just a bit of disclaimer, I just recorded pretty much the rest of the predictions video and the footage got corrupted, so that's great. So pretty much got to redo this whole thing. So again, like I mentioned, Burnley, Leeds, Sunderland, all game relegated. In 17th position, I have Brentford, hovering right above the relegation zone. For me, lost shakeup in the club, not in a good way. Loss of Thomas Frank, who's been the manager for over a decade at the club. Oh, no, not over a decade, about a decade at the club. Very close. For me, the hugest loss Brentford have, and the manager they bring in, I believe he was one of the coaches or the assistant manager last time. I know Frank took a lot of his staff with him to Tottenham, but the guy they brought in, I believe, is his first senior managerial position ever, and managing the Premier League for your first ever experience as a manager, for me, is a red flag there. Secondly, I look at the loss of Brian Mbeumo. He was a huge factor for Brentford's success last year. He's out the door, as well as Norgard, Brentford's captain. Again, another huge loss for them. I don't think the loss of Flecken is that big of a loss. I think Kelleher is a great replacement. And for me, it looks like Wiss is almost out the door, or he's trying to force a move. Hasn't been training with a team. I think that's a bit of a cancer to the locker room in terms of Wiss is now the face of the club, and now he wants to leave right after the departures of Emblemo, Frank, and Norgard. I don't see Whistle maybe leaving by. I don't think Whistle will get moved by the end of the window because Brentford will be very hesitant to sell. However, I could see him leaving in January, especially when Brentford are really struggling this season. And yeah, I have them. I think they have just enough about them to just survive above the relegation three. I think Sunderland could maybe challenge them a little bit. However, like I said, with the points gap, yeah, I think Sunderland will close it a bit, but I still don't think it'll be enough. And I think Brentford will just stay up. So in 16th position, I have Wolves. Again, with Wolves, for me, I think they've done okay to strengthen. I do like a couple other pieces. I think Arias a good sign. I like Strand Larson, I like João Gomez. But I think a lot last year they relied heavily on Cunha, especially to win them games or steal points out of teams. And for me, when you lose Cunha, I don't know who that match winner will be for Wolves. So I look at them. I think they have enough about them, enough quality to stay up in the division, but I don't really see them. I see them taking a step back or maybe finishing similar to where they were last season, just because I don't know who that match winner will be for them. Because I think Cunha won them a lot of points, and losing them like Cunha and not really replacing him. Yes, certain players in your team can take a step up, like Strand Larson, João Gomez, who I do expect to have better seasons than they did last year. But again, I just see Wolves finishing, in about the lower mid table. In at 15th, I have Fulham. For me, Fulham just haven't done enough in the transfer window. Pretty much the same team as last year, and I think just teams around them have strengthened a lot better than they haven't made real transfers. I think they brought up a backup goalkeeper, and that's it. So I just don't see Fulham really elevating themselves from last year. A bit stagnating, maybe even going backwards a little bit. Marco Silva is a good manager. I do like Marco Silva, but again, I can't really see Fulham really elevating themselves from where they were last season. Raul Jimenez, as much as I do rate Raul Jimenez, I think a year older. Yes, it's the World Cup year, so maybe he'll have maybe something a little bit more approved, more of a chip on his shoulder than he did last year. But again, a 34-year-old Raul, I think he's 34. I could be wrong with his age, but he's up there in age. I just don't think relying on him to really elevate you over the table, like Dominic Traore. Muniz I like as a player, but again, I don't know do I really see him taking a step up this year? Probably not. And again, so I just have Fulham finishing around the lower mid-table. Can't really see them finishing higher than that. In at 14th, I got West Ham. Again, coming off a very disappointing season from last year. Haven't done much in the window. A lot more departures than ins. But yeah, I expect them to do a little bit better than last year. I think some of their signings from last year will do a lot better this season. A lot of them had disappointing seasons last year or under-delivered. So I expect them to get slightly better, slightly improve. I do like Graham Potter as a manager. So again, I think maybe he can get something out of West Ham. I think they've had an okay preseason, a bit of ups and downs in the preseason, but I think signs are there for like a lower mid-table finish. Might challenge for a top half position, with a good run of form. But again, I just had them in about here. I just think the teams ahead of them are just better, have better squad depth, are just better, and have more quality in their squads, pretty much, or better managers. So yeah, I got West Ham finishing 14th. In that 13th position, I have Palace. I think a lot of people are projecting Palace to finish a bit higher, especially maybe after the Community Shield. But for me, I have them finishing 13th. It's just also a bit of a disclaimer. Like, if they lose Eze and Gehi, or if they keep them, I still think they'll finish 13th. But my reason is I think they'll go strong in the Conference League. I think there'll be a big emphasis on the Conference League. I think Glasner really viewed that competition as a competition they can win. Yes, I know Palace are upset they couldn't be competing in the Europa League this year. However, I still think there'll be a big importance on the Conference League, and it will take their league form because of that. We saw West Ham a couple years ago. I think they finished around 15th, and it ended up not really mattering. Like their fans didn't really care because they ended up winning the whole competition. And I think for a club like Palace, if they were to go on to win the Conference League, I think they accept dropping down the table and sacrificing their Premier League form in order to win a European trophy. You look at Glasner, won the FA Cup, won the Europa League of Frankfurt. I think Palace are a good team, built for knockout competitions. They got a manager who knows how to compete in Europe, knows how to compete in one-legged, two-legged ties in Europe, like knockout competition football. So yeah, I expect Palace to have a big season in Europe. However, I do think it'll hurt their league form. So moving on to 12th place, I got Bournemouth next. With Bournemouth, I like Uriel a lot. Well, like Semenyo, and I think someone like Evan Nielsen will again only continue to improve this year. I do like Evan Nielsen as a player. I think you look at Bournemouth, the glaring issues are they lost key parts of the defense. I think Huijsen was always a player who was going to go, so they're probably expecting that. Same thing with Kirkus, but then losing Zabarny and I think Keppel, who actually was important for them last season, I think will hurt them, especially in terms of how much they can really elevate from last year. However, I do think that they have enough quality in their squad and a good enough manager that they won't be maybe in about here. Maybe they'll fall below a Palace or West Ham, but I think they'll be just like lower mid table. I guess like in about like 12. I don't really see them competing for a European position. I think that's where they were on the trajectory was aiming towards. However, I think the loss in their defense are too much. And even though they brought in I believe is the left back they brought in. I might be mistaken. They brought in a left back who I think is a decent replacement for Kirk is, but again, the center back depth I'm still concerned about. Senesi, I like Senesi, he's a good center back, but again, losing Zabarny and Huijsen, and especially your keeper, I think the big ask for Bournemouth to finish any higher than they did last season. So moving on to 11th, I have Everton. Now I'm expecting a big season out of Everton. I actually think they could finish higher. However, I'll just keep them in that 11th. I think a bit of a conservative prediction from me, but I do like the signings they made. I like Barry. I like. I think he'll really improve the quality of Everton. One thing they did struggle with last season was scoring goals. So I think he adds a lot of quality to the team, as well as Jack Grealish. I think Jack Grealish is a great sign for Everton. I do think he has a lot to prove and still a lot to offer. World Cup year, I think he'll be inspired to have a big year for Everton. As a City fan, for when I saw Grealish, like the few cameos he did make last year, I do think he's been unlucky with injuries. I do think like when Grealish has played, he's looked well. Like there's been a couple games where he starts the game, he plays 20 minutes, gets injured, but those 20 minutes he looks pretty good. He looks sharp. So for me, I think he could really have a good season at Everton, especially a team where he'll have more creative freedom, more time on the ball, similar to his Villa days. So I'm expecting a big season from Everton. Again, I like Moyes. Moyes came into Everton last year, had a good, they had a solid second half of the season. Everton won the strongest defense, right, not strongest defense, but they have a really good defense in the league. Definitely one of the better defenses in the league. And I think is a great player, so I only expect him to build upon last season. So yeah, I think Everton finishing 11th, potentially even in the top half. I think it's a very fair prediction. I think they'll be probably the biggest overachievers in the league this year. Maybe given the context, I mean, I don't want to spoil what I have ahead, but there could be other teams that would be considered bigger overachievers than Everton. But yeah, I think Everton definitely will be one of the teams that overachieve in the Premier League this year. In a 10th, I have Forest. For me, this is similar to Palace. I think they'll put a big importance on the Europa League because they're a team that doesn't typically get European football. So for them to be playing in Europe, I know they were aiming for a Champions League last year, and there'll be a big gut after that. But I do think there'll be a big importance on the Europa League, and I think they have a squad that can go pretty far in the Europa League. Do I think they have a squad that can win it? I don't necessarily think so, but I do like their squad. I think they made good signings, like to replace Alenga. I think Ndoye is a great replacement for Alenga. And signing Igor Jesus from Botafogo, Another great sign. I don't know how much game time he'll get. Speaking of Chris Wood and Awoni, don't well keep Morgan gives White time down to a new contract. So yeah, I got Forest finishing about 10th. I don't think they'll finish as high as they did last year, but I think Forest will be competitive. Hard team to beat. Nuno's a good manager, and yeah, I think they'll do fairly decent in Europe this season. All right, at ninth, I have Newcastle. I think Newcastle are going to have a disastrous. I'll be a strong. I think Newcastle are going to have a disastrous season this year. I don't really see Newcastle having a good year just because I don't see Isak playing for Newcastle again. Even if he doesn't leave by the end of the window, I think he's kind of burnt the bridge there um, with them. So I think he won't play for them again. And I don't see if Isak's not playing for them, whether or not he just refuses to play for them or he leaves in the summer or before the end of the window. I don't see who's going to replace the goals for them. Anthony Gordon's got to do a lot. I expect a big season from Anthony Gordon, especially the World Cup year, it being a World Cup year. But how much is he up? Can he carry the attacking burden of Newcastle? I question that. Alenga's an okay signing, but again, with Alenga, is he really the player to elevate Newcastle as a club? I don't think so. And Newcastle failed to get any of their other transfer targets in. So I look at Newcastle. I think they'll be a team that, without Isak, will struggle to find goals. I think they'll get bounced out of the Champions League pretty early on in the league phase. And I think Eddie Howe will get the sack this year. I don't think Newcastle will have a good year this year. I think they're set up to have a disastrous season. And I have them finishing ninth. So in that eighth, I'm Brighton. So I think there's a lot to like about Brighton. I think they have a lot of good players. A lot to build on from last year. Spent one of the summer. The Kuiper is an exciting signing for Brighton. My only question with Brighton is maybe the goals up top, like in replacing João Pedro. For me, I like Danny Welbeck. He's a good player. He'll get you about 10 goals in the league, but is Danny Welbeck really the striker that gets you competing amongst European positions? I don't think so, especially at his age. They brought in a striker from the German second division, who I don't know much about him, but again, I think it'll be a tough ask from going from the German second tier into the Premier League and leading a team like Brighton into a European position. I think they'll be competing. However, I had them just missing out and finishing eighth. So, looking at the Conference League, Europa League positions, fifth to seventh for me. Lot of thinking with this one because for me, like the three clubs I have around these positions, I think they can all interchange. However, just for now, I'm gonna have Spurs in seventh. Now with Spurs, I think there's a lot to like about Spurs. I like their squad. However, the reason why I have Spurs seventh is because I don't know who in their squad is really gonna step up and elevate them to become a team that competes maybe up amongst here. Again, this is a team that finished 16th last year, so jumping from 16th to 7th is already a big enough leap. I don't really, feels kind of hard giving them any more than that, given the fact that they didn't finish that low in the table. My issue with Spurs, right, is I don't know who on their team really offers that star power in terms of that match winning quality, to win decisive games, on their own. I think Kudus is a great sign. I think he could be the player to do that. But other than him, I look at the rest of the team. There's no other real star quality in the team. But I think they're very solid. I haven't had a good preseason, so I think the question marks are right out about Thomas Frank in terms of how he sets up his Spurs team. But I do rate Thomas Frank as a manager. He's a good manager. And, we'll see whether or not sacking Andrews is a good decision and bringing in Thomas Frank was a good decision or not. As the season progresses. And I think there'll be an importance about doing well in the Champions League, so it might hurt their league form a little bit. And I think they'll have an okay season. I have them in about 7th. So for me, question marks about Spurs about which players really stand out on the team. I think they have a really well-rounded squad. However, I think the lack of star power hurts them in terms of elevating themselves amongst these positions up here. So in 6th, I have Villa. So, Villa haven't done much business in the window. They brought in Gassani, who I think is a great signing. But, again, they haven't done much in the window besides bring him in. I think I really like Villa's squad. Struggled with injuries a bit last year, but I like Unai Emery. I like their team. I think their team will only continue to get better. They have good players like Rodgers. I expect him to have a big year this year. Onana, Tielemans, Watkins, Paul Torres. I like their team a lot. I think they'll do well enough to finish in about sixth place. I don't think they'll be challenging for a Champions League position. I think Emery will put again the importance on Europa League, and maybe Europa League will become a path for them to get Champions League football next year. But I have them finishing sixth, and yeah, moving on to team I have United. Now with United, they're playing one game a week. I think they strengthen well in positions they need to strengthen. I think Sesko and Buemo Cunha. Those are all players, who will win you games. Just out the sheer fact, you add more goals to the team, something that United have been crying out for the last couple of seasons now. I think defensively they're okay, and I think this team they have a squad that's good enough to play one game a week, pretty much compared to the rest of the teams around them who are all playing in European competitions. So with United only focusing on the league, I think they'll. I had them finishing minimum seventh, but I'm going to elevate them to fifth. Now, I would probably drop them down to seventh if they don't bring a midfielder in by the end of the window. Now, that's my biggest issue with United is that I don't think they have any midfielder who can play in that midfield too at a top level. Now, when we talk about Bruno, Bruno's a great player, but I think playing Bruno deeper in that position against the top teams in the league, like these four, any team that's in about competing with them for these European positions, I think it's a liability. They'll get caught on transition, and I think in games where you're not dominant, Bruno will be a liability defensively in those games. Now, if you want to play Bruno against like the lower half of the table and deeper, then yeah, I think there's no issue with that. Looking at the rest of the midfielders at United, rely on Casemiro for 38 games in a season. At his age, I think it's just not going to work out. I think Ugarte is a good player, but again, not enough for that system. And Mino, for me, he can't play. He's not fast enough. He's not physically dominant enough to be playing in that midfield too. He's a great player, but he's just not built for the system. So, for me, United need a midfielder. If they sign a midfielder, such as Baleba, or anyone who can come in and just be, who can just run up and down, get up and down the system Almiron wants to play. I think United are nailed on for a fifth position, but I don't see them finishing. I don't see them pushing for Champions League though. I think there will be a gap between fourth and fifth, like a pretty significant gap. Like I'm talking about, like maybe like 9 points between fifth and fourth. So in fourth place, I have Chelsea. I think Chelsea will have a good year. I think they'll do better in Europe than they do in the league. I think I can really see them making at least minimum the quarterfinals. I think the way their team is subbed, they can beat any team on their day. We saw that in the Club World Cup. I think they're a really good cup team. They won the Conference League. I know that's like not really. They're playing like teams probably most people have never heard of, but I think Chelsea will have a good year this year. I like João Pedro. They make good signings in the window. Esteval Gins. Garnacho's a bit of a questionable one for me because I don't really understand how he fits in the team. So I like Chelsea. I think they'll have a good year. I had them finishing fourth. I don't think they have enough to get ahead of the three teams I have ahead of them. So I have them fourth. They might surprise and maybe finish third, but again, I think Arsenal, Liverpool, and City have a little bit more to Chelsea, especially competing over a league season than than Chelsea does. So yeah, I had them finishing fourth. All right, so in third position, I have actually finishing third. For me, I'm hesitant to put them in the top two just because I think City this year will go through another transition year again. I think Pep will again be over reliant on players such as Bernardo and Gundogan and like Akanji who have been key players for City in the past, and again how much trust he instills in the newer faces coming into City. I do like a lot of business they have done in the window, like Turkey, great signing, Reinders, who I think has the potential to be signing of the season. And again, if you were to take Haaland and Raji away, I think there's question marks in terms of like what City's best starting 11 or in terms of like, what system City want to play. Again, I think City even if they were to sign Rodrigo, maybe I would put them second. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of turnover, a lot of transition in the club. Say finding out what's their best team, what's the best formation they want to play. And again, I think they're really set up for the season after to be competing again for the league. But this year I have them finishing third. I just don't see Pep. Pep cannot have a disastrous year or as disastrous year as the one last year. So, but again, I think the City team will be in about third. And one thing I want to know is like Phil Foden needs to have a big year for his career. For me, this is a make or break year for his career, World Cup year. If he has another down year, I think maybe his future at City is up in the air as well as maybe his starting spot for England. So again, I see finishing third. In at second, I have Liverpool. Now, many people have Liverpool to win the league, clear favorites for the league, and I wouldn't disagree. I think you look at the window they had, and Ekatike, Wirtz, Kirkes, Frimpong, you know, the team has only improved. Now, I have some questions about Frimpong. I don't think he can defend in the back four, the right back. We've seen it with the Dutch. He's not trusted there, and when he does play for the Netherlands, he plays as a right winger. My biggest issue with Liverpool, why I don't have them winning the league. I'm also going to talk about why I think Arsenal are more equipped to win the league than Liverpool, is because I look at Liverpool's center back depth. Van Dijk and Kanate, for me, are two players who cannot play 38 games a year or won't be available for all 38 games of the season. And the only other natural center back replacement is Joe Gomez, who also is depth for your fullbacks as well. So, again, I think Liverpool need another center back. They're looking to bring in Guehi. And even if they did bring in Guehi, I still would pip Arsenal to the title over them. I think it will be a close race, like compared to last year, where Liverpool just ran away with it. But however, another thing I like to know with Liverpool is I do think their team is a bit overrated. I think I got a bit overrated last year because again, the league title they won. Yes, the league title is a league title, and they are a title winning team. So not to discredit Liverpool, but it was one of the weaker Premier League teams in terms of like the teams that were also competing for a title. Like Arsenal didn't put much of a challenge. They took a step back. City had a disastrous year. So I think this Liverpool team's a bit overrated, if we're being honest, but they have strengthened well. I think they will be a lot better than they were last year, for 100%. And another issue I have with them is also like what Liverpool look like without Gravenberch, because for me they don't have anyone else who can really play as a six as efficiently as Gravenberch. We saw it in the Community Shield. They got killed on transitions. Like, that midfield of like Szoboszlai, like McAllister and Curtis Jones does not work. No one can play in that double as a six. So for me, if Gravenberch is missing, they also have issues in depth there. So again, I think Arsenal for me are more equipped to win the league because if you asked me last year, I think Arsenal were one player from a title winning team, and it was a striker. I think the last couple of seasons they've been calling out for a striker. Now, maybe Gyökeres wasn't their most ideal fit. However, I do think Gyökeres is a great enough striker to help Arsenal win the league. For me, one of the key reasons why Arsenal are most equipped to win the league after adding a striker is because they already had the best defense in the league. I think it's not even close to other teams. They are the best defensive team in the league. They already add with another player like Mascara at the back, who I think is a solid defender. So that's good depth for Saliba and Gabriel. I think a shout for who could be signing this season, Zubimendi, I think is a great signing. Great player. I think he definitely is an improvement over Party and definitely an improvement over Rice as a 6 because for me Rice is better play as an 8 because Rice can't receive the ball off the center backs and distribute the ball well from the 6 position. So for me, Rice playing as an 8 elevates Rice's game as he's played his more natural position where I think he's set up to thrive more, as well as bringing in Norgard, who's an underrated signing. So again, allowing Rice to be played higher up the pitch. Gyökeres, for me, I think he'll succeed at Arsenal. For me, most of the talk around Gyökeres saying that he doesn't fit the system, or Arsenal are going to be playing against little blocks, and like Gyökeres can't play with his back to goal, his Lincoln play isn't good enough, is similar to the narrative around Haaland joined the Premier League. So, and we all saw what Haaland went on to do. Now Gyökeres won't have a season like Haaland has, but again, I think all the talk about Gyökeres and negative talk around Gyökeres is a bit overblown and a bit blown out of proportion. I think Arsenal will also adjust to his style of play as well. So And you look at Arsenal as a team, like this is a team that creates a lot of chances, so they just need someone to get on the end of them. And I think Yorkers can be that for them. Again, this is a team that was also putting 4 or 5 past teams, despite not having a killer up top with like someone like Kai Havertz up top. My only question with Arsenal is bringing Madueke. I look at the winger position. I don't really understand the signing of Madueke. It doesn't elevate Arsenal at all. It's like a very sideways step. And I think a bold prediction for me, I think Nwaneri will be starting for Arsenal at the end of the season off the left. Even though that's not his preferred position, I think he'll be shoehorned out there because I look at Martinelli, Trossard, and Madueke, and none of them really convince me they can hold a starting position in a title-winning team. I think Nwaneri is a very talented player. I think he'll have a huge role to play. And I'm expecting someone like Myers Lewis Skelly to have a shout for a young player this year. I think he'll have a great year for them. And yeah, those are my Premier League predictions. I don't think there's much I would change. I think the only two maybe I'd flip flop. Maybe I'd flip flop Wolves and Fulham. Um, Looking at it, top goal scorer I have Holland. I think City's attack is only going to improve this year, and with City being, just looking to be a better team this year, I think Holland will be back to his goal scoring best as he does every year. But I think he'll take it up a notch. I don't think he'll hit the figures he hit during the treble winning year, but I think Holland will be top goal scorer. And my player of the season, if I have Arsenal win the league, then it would have to be an Arsenal player, and for me, that's going to be Saka. I think Saka, for me, still massively disrespected amongst football fans. And if Arsenal were to win the league, he would have to be the player to carry them to that league title. I do think he is the player in that squad with the most X factor. And again, I think with Yorkers up top, Saka whipping in balls to Yorkers, I think he'll have a huge role to play for them. Build a good connection with Yorkers up top. And yeah, those are my Premier League predictions. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you disagree with anything. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Later.